Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Florida International Panthers, who finished 4-8 last season. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with the spring game on April 13th. We have a special guest joining us today. He's a writer for Lemon City Live. He is a co-host of the official fan podcast of Florida International Athletics. He is Jake Gibson from the Paws Up Podcast. He can be found at Paws Up Podcast on X. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Hi, Justice. Thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about FIU football as the season draws closer, as college football 25 drops closer. That's going to have a lot of hype to it, but yeah, the vibes are high over in the 305 for the Panthers.
For those not familiar with the Panthers' offensive style, how would you describe it?
It's a pretty well mixed conglomeration of pass and rush. Last season was defined. Some of the biggest plays of FIU's offense last season was designed towards the deep ball, from our quarterback Kiwan Jenkins to wide receiver Chris Mitchell, among our other talented wide receivers from last season. They went towards that a lot. It didn't work out a lot, but when it did, it was exciting, and it really kicked things off for the Panthers. But they had a pretty consistent offense as far as passing and running. It was just a matter of finding the perfect play for the 1st and 10, and if you get close to the down marker, say it's 2nd and 2, 3rd and 1, then you'll bring out your running backs. But I wouldn't say the offense, as far as schemes and play calling and all that, was anything so special out of the line, but there were some games last season which proved that they were efficient, and that's obviously, I think, what matters the most. Their games last year against North Texas and UConn are probably the best examples of that, with what they were able to do, especially under Kiwan Jenkins, who as a true freshman last year was put into the starting role after the Week 0 game against Louisiana Tech, when our former quarterback, Grayson James, only threw for 4 passing yards in the game. And Grayson, he's a good guy. We had him on the show back in the day. He's now with Boston College, and the keys are now in Jenkins's hands to keep the offense going and become the leader that everyone, I think, wants him to be.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, like you said, last season's starter Kiwan Jenkins is back. He took over in the second game of the season, like you mentioned, and Grayson James only threw for 4 yards that first game, but they had the running game was going pretty strong in that game against Louisiana Tech. As you mentioned, James is now at Boston College. But how did Jenkins look in the spring?
Promising. He's bulked up, which is always nice to see. But more importantly, he now has that leadership mentality that he's wanted to hone in on, and the rest of the offense is rallying around that. Jenkins, I mean, he's a Miami guy, went to Miami Central High School, won a bunch of accolades there. He's the quarterback on this team that fans have wanted to see a school like FIU have for a while. This is one of the few years where we feel 100% confident about our quarterback situation, which is tough for a lot of G5 teams. Yeah. But no, Kiwan Jenkins is our guy. His play style is exciting. He can be a very accurate passer, not to mention a really good scrambler when the pocket collapses. And it's exciting to see how he'll develop the pressure that he'll take with being that leader. Obviously, FIU has a tough task in Week 1 going on the road to Indiana to take on the Hoosiers. But still, we all have very high expectations for Kiwan Jenkins. He was exciting last year, and I think he's only going to get better. His ceiling is very high, and he has a very exciting skill set.
Well, I can tell you, Luke and I will both be rooting for you guys week 1. We always want to see those G5 upsets of those P4 teams. Who do you think will be the number 2 quarterback behind Jenkins?
Probably Hayden Carlson. There is a bit of a quarterback a war between a few of our guys, between Carlson and Clayton Dees, Chaden Peary, among others, but I feel like you have to give Carlson the nod just because he was also the QB2 of last year as well. He actually got snaps in games. There were unfortunately a few blowout losses for FIU towards the back end of the schedule that Hayden Carlson needed to step in to finish games. So I feel like you ought to give it to him, but hopefully we won't have that situation this season where we'll need to see anyone but Kiwan, or lights out, as we call him.
That's a great nickname.
It's wonderful, yeah.
Moving over to the running game, this room is highlighted by the return of Shamari Lawrence and Kawan Owens. They combined for 94% of the running back carries in 2023, but they also get Lexington Joseph back from injury.
Yeah.
How did that room look in the spring?
Great, and it was a bit confusing coming in because we were very fortunate that both Keyshawn Owens and Shamari Lawrence returned, and that they're suited up and will be ready to play this season. But yeah, Lexington Joseph, we call him Flex. He is a beast. He was super good before he was sidelined with that injury that set him back all of last year. So when you combine a really good, I'd say a reliable running game that FIU had last season with a experienced veteran like Lexington Joseph, it's very exciting to see how that'll all develop come the start of this regular season. I still feel confident that Owens and Lawrence will get plenty of snaps this season. They earned the right to that because of how solid they both looked last year. But yeah, I myself am interested to see how many snaps Lexington or Flex will get compared to the two young bucks that we have on this team that are, again, already reliable. But no matter how you look at it, the running room will likely be improved compared to last season just because of that. Now you have a three-headed monster and Flex, Owens, and Lawrence, and that's really exciting to see. Quarterback's best friend is a good running back that can secure the third and twos, the second and ones. It's exciting.
How is Joseph's recovery from the injury coming along? Is it going well? Is he gonna be ready come week one?
Come spring practices, he didn't get as many reps as some of the other players, but by this point, he's good to go. He's locked and loaded, and not really a whole lot much to say, but Lexington, he should be good to go come week one.
So you mentioned like you kind of expect it to probably be like a three-headed kind of monster in terms of the running game. Do you think they have like defined roles? Like, hey, this guy is the short yardage and the goal line back. This guy is kind of the pass catcher or change of pace, or
it's tough to say. I feel like you saw Owens quite a bit towards the goal line, and you saw players like Shamari Lawrence more towards maybe every now and then you'll get the draw play on 1st and 10 just to see what the defense is coming with. You saw Lawrence for that, and then you saw Owens when it's a goal to go situation. I feel like more than likely that wouldn't change that much this season. However, offensive coordinator David Yost has been cooking, changing things up with the play calling. And funnily enough, it goes back to Kewan Jenkins because, like I said, he can be a runner. You know, he himself can burn defenders when he has to. So it's definitely going to be some experimentation during the non-conference schedule about what works best, leading up to obviously taking on the rest of Conference USA and seeing what works best.
If it were up to you, who do you think gets that first carry for a running back against Indiana?
Lexington Joseph, maybe partly just because of the story that there is regarding his return due to injury. It's always great to see a player like him come back. He worked so hard to get back here. He was always positive, even when sidelined with that injury. You know, he was rooting for the rest of the running back room. So definitely just not just because of the story, but also to see just how ready he is to return to full-time action for the FIU Panthers. But yeah, it's tough not to say Flex for that.
All right, moving back to the passing game.
Yeah,
they did suffer a huge loss when Conference USA All-Conference first team Chris Mitchell transferred to Notre Dame. He was, by far the wide receiver one a year ago in terms of targets, receptions, yards, and even touchdowns. But they do return guys like Dean Patterson and Eric Rivers, and they brought in some transfers as well. How did that unit look in the spring?
They also looked fantastic, thankfully enough. Like you had mentioned, losing Chris Mitchell hurts because he was, without a doubt, your wide receiver one kind of way. FIU has been kind of a wagon as far as producing wide receiver talent. Before him, you had Tyrese Chambers, went on to Maryland, and obviously maybe the best FIU alum from football being T.Y. Hilton, who obviously went ahead and had a great career for the Colts. I think now he's with Dallas, or maybe he's a free agent at this point. So that was the biggest question this offseason, in my opinion, is that who will sort of take Chris Mitchell's place, even if, or maybe they won't even go with a real wide receiver one scenario where there's just going to be one guy who's going to take the majority of the snaps, like how it was last season. But regardless, It looks solid, especially because they did a great job recruiting and they did a great job signing some talent to this team. You had mentioned Dean Patterson, who I think will likely be the wide receiver one, but you also have players like Desna Washington, the transfer from New Mexico, who's massive. He looks to be a stud and can definitely go and grab those long balls because he's got the height and hands to do it. So that's going to be really fun to see. Obviously, Jenkins, his connection last year was with Chris Mitchell, and now he's going to have to find that next big connection. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, once again, how that sort of develops, who's going to be his number one passer as the season goes on.
So, obviously, fall camp starts here in just under, I think, like some camps open in like 10 days, the 24th. The majority, I think, start the 29th. But and so a lot can change between now and week 1 against Indiana.
Yeah.
But if you had to pick who the wide receiver starters are week 1, who would you pick right now?
Oof. So definitely Dean Patterson. He's just that reliable kind of guy. He was Mr. Reliable last season, and I think he's going to be even better as he enters as a redshirt junior with plenty of experience under his belt with the Panthers. As far as a wide receiver too, you could go with either Eric Rivers or Juju Lewis, and I'd be okay. They're probably Eric Rivers, just again because he has that experience. There's actually quite a bit of experience in that wide receiver room for the Panthers this year. Plenty of redshirt juniors all over, and that's great to see. As far as the wide receiver 3, like I said, I'd love to see what Desna Washington can bring to this team immediately, just to see where he's at. I know he's a transfer, and he obviously has never taken a snap with FIU before, but I feel like he just meshes quite well with the rest of the team. So for my 3 starting receivers, I'd go Dean Patterson, Eric Rivers, and then Desna Washington.
Awesome. All right. If you were to describe how the tight ends are utilized in this offense to someone who has never caught a game, how would you describe it?
Blocking first, catching later. I mean, we do have maybe one of the greatest names in college football, Rocky Beers.
2 of the greatest names.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Rowdy Beers is no longer with the team. Sadly.
Okay.
He actually left to pursue becoming a fighter. So congratulations to him. We wish him absolutely luck to that. But we actually had Rocky Beers on our podcast not that long ago. He's super excited to get things going. But, he had mentioned it. The tight end room, they can sometimes be treated as extra offensive linemen to give Jenkins that time in the pocket, which is great to see because he had great numbers throwing to players like Chris Mitchell, who got 1,000 yards. It doesn't happen a lot for FIU football, having 1,000-yard receivers. But, yeah, I feel like tight ends aren't used quite that often. But if FIU wants to adopt a heavy tight end usage, Rocky Beers could be that guy. You also have Josiah Meeman, a senior on the team. He's got experience as well. But that 1-2 tandem between Meeman and Rocky could be pretty cool to see if they really want to utilize them more towards the passing game. But I wouldn't count on it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like like last year maybe it was a game by game basis, right?
Yeah,
where they would get a lot of work in the passing game one game, and then maybe be quiet for a couple games, and then get a lot of work again. But yeah,
Rocky caught the first touchdown of any tight end for FIU football last season in the finale against Western Kentucky. That was the first touchdown for the tight end group. So if that doesn't show you how they were utilized, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I think I actually had that touchdown catch in the.
Yeah, you had it too. It was a crazy
video.
play. It was an insane play. But yeah, if they do want to utilize tight ends more in the passing game, Rocky might be that guy.
All right, moving over to the offensive line, they look to be in pretty good shape here in 2024. Yep. Conference USA All-Conference first-teamer Philip Houston, their right tackle from a year ago, they did lose him. He transferred to Colorado. But they bring back the rest of this line, and that has to be a good feeling for fans, and even more so for Kawan Jenkins. How did the offensive line look in the spring?
They looked solid. However, in that spring showcase, they definitely had some hiccups here and there that could be attributed to a very hungry defensive line that FIU might have, which is, again, exciting to see. But, yeah, the offensive line has had their hiccups here and there and is obviously, I'd say, the biggest concern of the offense in general, just if they can stay healthy, if they can be as reliable as they can be. But no, there are some exciting players there. Unfortunately, one of our better linemen, John Bach, is suspended for the first part of the season. With that said, you could see a player like Jadarius Lee. He can play anywhere on the line. He's been the talk of the town with the coaching staff. A guy like him very exciting to see what he can deliver to this team. And obviously, I think that one of the best aspects of an offensive lineman, aside from just being a natural talent, is to have longevity. If you can play a whole season without something bad happening to you, and that unfortunately, FIU has not had a great track record with that, as many other G5 teams across the nation. So a lot of questions still with that part of the offense, but overall, there are some key players that fans should be excited about.
Yeah, I always feel like spring games, the offensive line and the defensive line are kind of the hardest to really get a feel for, because like is it the defensive line is really good or the offensive line is bad, or vice versa. I find it very hard to get a read on in the trenches there in spring for sure.
And obviously some of the best games for FIU offensively, like I alluded to, their games against the Yukon Huskies and North Texas Mean Green down the line. That game against Sam Houston State that went to double overtime, that was an exciting game. But those games, the offensive lines performed particularly well. Jenkins wasn't pressured as much as he was in other games. So, yeah, that definitely, obviously, in any level of football, the offensive line being reliable and being there uninjured goes a long way as far as to what the quarterback can do.
All right. If you have to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who are you picking?
It would be easy to say Kewan Jenkins because this is his year to shine. Obviously, he's gone through trials and tribulations. Like I said, he was sort of brought in there out of the blue in the second week of the season. But not to mention, we had spoken with the offensive coordinator, David Yost, and one of the things that he did during this offseason is watch more film of Jenkins in high school and what he was able to do there when he won a billion awards, and Miami Central is one of the powerhouses of high school football in South Florida, which, as I'm sure you know, is an absolute hotspot for young talent all over the nation. So he's looked a lot into that to see what will really work with Jenkins. So the easy answer would be that Lights is going to have an absolutely amazing season, provided everything works out for him, that you have players like Patterson who can be just as reliable as they were last season, that the offensive line blocks for him well, and that he has a solid running room to back him up against the defenses that really particularly go against the quarterbacks. As far as an offensive weapon, there's so much talent in the running back room between Lawrence Owens and Flex that it doesn't feel safe picking one of them. Dean Patterson could be great if Jenkins is great, because I feel like that's likely the guy he's going to be throwing to a lot. So de facto, Patterson could have an amazing season.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
Paws Up.